My uncle's not well, Mr. Carnby. I want to make sure he's all right.
Then what's my part in this? You couldn't get a cab?
I just wouldn't feel safe going alone.
Survival horror fans have been eating well lately. Capcom was the first to make waves with its slew of Resident Evil remakes. Dead Space then received similar treatment, and most recently, Alan Wake 2 more than lived up to the decade-long wait with how well it embraced the genre. It was only a matter of time until the very progenitor of 3D survival horror got a remake of its own, now here in the form of the simply titled Alone in the Dark. Overall, it makes the switch to the increasingly popular over-the-shoulder perspective remarkably well. Yet, while its bifurcated storyline featuring two distinct characters makes for a fun romp, monotonous puzzles and a severe absence of scares ultimately hold it back from the greatness of its genre competition. One of the things I love most about this reimagining of 1992's Alone in the Dark is the setting. You see, rather than set it during the modern day, developer Pieces Interactive has seen fit to stay true to the original game's mood and location by basing the story of Emily Hartwood and Detective Carnby in 1920s Louisiana. This helps give the 5 to 6 hour adventure a different flavour compared to a lot of other survival horror games that tend to favour all things grimdark, providing an unsettling atmosphere where the inhabitants of Deseto Manor seem that bit too off-kilter for their own good. Carnby and Hartwood have arrived at the establishment in the hopes of tracking down the latter's missing uncle, which essentially boils down to a lot of backtracking, puzzle solving, and tussles with the occasional mutated nightmares. As far as memorable locales go, I enjoyed my time peeling back the layers of Deserto Manor, digging into its many secrets and hidden stories amidst the wider objective of tracking down Jeremy Hartwood. I wouldn't say it's as characterful as, say, the Spencer Mansion from the original Resident Evil, or even the RPD headquarters from 2019's Resident Evil 2 remake, but the nature of how its 4 floors opened up to me gradually always had me guessing about what dangers it had lurking around next. Alone in the Dark manages to prevent its singular location from ever getting too stale though, thanks to its psychological nature of the narrative. At various points within each character's 5 chapters, you'll enter a different realm, all distinct in their sense of place and general vibe. One minute I found myself searching an ancient temple underneath the desert, while another I was seeking for answers within the streets of Louisiana's smoky French Quarter. The game's willingness to fully lean into the supernatural meant I had no idea where I'd end up next, even if what I was asked to do while there never changed all that much. Killing Eve's Jodie Comer and David Harbour of Stranger Things fame give admirable performances as Alone in the Dark's 2 leads, lending the plot a sense of mystery and weight that it may have struggled to maintain otherwise. At the very start of the game, much like the survival horror games of old, you're given the choice of who to play as. And though some puzzles and locations change towards either campaign's back half, expect to see a lot of the same story beats throughout the majority of the adventure. David Harbour's schlubby detective ultimately proved to be my favourite of the 2, largely because it's a haggard stereotype he's played so well countless times before. This being a survival horror game, however, you'd probably expect to be frightened a few times. Sadly, at least for me, only very occasionally did Alone in the Dark ever elicit anything close to a chill down my spine, preferring to err on the side of mystery and suspense without ever really paying off with a real scare. Spooky goings on regularly happened during the 2 investigative pairs' search for Jeremy Hartwood, don't get me wrong, but it isn't anywhere near as creative with its brand of horror. Even the main enemy types you run into resemble gloopy mush, which makes fighting them almost entirely free of real stakes or jeopardy. Even when it comes to the survival half of its self-proclaimed genre, Alone in the Dark finds more ways to disappoint. For one thing, there is no inventory management to contend with whatsoever, whereas the likes of Resident Evil and Dead Space excellently translated the act of managing your resources something to fear just as much as any monster. Pieces Interactive does a lot of the hard work for you, making key items in your inventory accessible as and when you need them. This, alongside the decision to make ammunition and health relatively easy to come by on the standard difficulty, removes a lot of the added layer of anxiety found in most other modern interpretations. Now, I could have have forgiven a lack of scares and resource generosity in Alone in the Dark, were it not for the painfully sour note the story ends on. Yes, it wraps up the mystery fairly smartly and included one or two twists I failed to see arrive, but capping it off is one of the worst final boss fights I think I've ever played in recent years. The main issue is just how devoid of spectacle and creativity it is in its design. But don't worry, I won't spoil the specific circumstances of how the last confrontation goes down in this review. This new interpretation of Alone in the Dark isn't a bad game, it's just not a particularly innovative or interesting one when compared to the high standard of survival horror we've come to expect from elsewhere. Jodie Comer and David Harbour give standout performances, the setting is most definitely unique, and the slight differences in both campaigns offer a solid reason to run through the story twice. By the time the credits ended my first time though, I felt like I'd already experienced a lot of what Carnby and Emily's spooky at best adventure had to offer me. Perhaps this is one survival horror remake that should have stayed in the dark. We give Alone in the Dark a 2 out of 5 here on Mirror Gaming. And that's it for our Alone in the Dark gameplay review. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. Do you agree or disagree? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed the video, why not smash that like button and hit subscribe, because we've got a lot more game previews, reviews and gameplay coming up that you're not going to want to miss. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.